Today's conversation is an exciting one because I don't often get to talk with people who are on their way to achieving Olympic glory. Today, I was joined by Skylar Grote, who's a female American wrestler, and we got to talk about a few exciting things like her training at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado, her future goals, and as she gets ready to prepare to compete in Spain, some of the ways that she is looking to help elevate the sport of women's wrestling. I hope everyone enjoys this one today. If you are enjoying this content, please give me a subscribe, a like, a comment. I appreciate all of the great things that people leave for me feedback-wise, and I really look forward to having more people join this community. Now, let's get it. Welcome back to Fight Capital, where we step into the ring of combat sports business. I'm your host, Ryan Rappaport. Today, I am joined by Skylar Grote, a distinguished American wrestler, Olympic hopeful, and MBA graduate of Oregon State University. As a dedicated athlete training at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, she embodies resilience and excellence in her sport. Beyond the mat, Skylar is a passionate advocate for the integration of psychological insights into athletic performance, exploring and understanding how the brain can enhance competitive edge and personal growth. She's committed to advancing women's wrestling, mentoring young athletes, and promoting the sport through innovative marketing strategies. Skylar's approach to athletics and business positions her as a leading figure in the future of wrestling and sports sponsorships. Thanks for joining me today, Skylar. How are you and where are you joining from?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm good. I am joining you from Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm back here training for the summer, getting ready to compete in Spain next month. And then I'll have non-Olympic world team weights in September, the trials in September for that. So just getting ready for those two competitions and enjoying summer at the same time.
Yeah, well, that's the time of year to be up in Colorado Springs. That's for sure. I lived in Colorado for a little bit and love Colorado Springs, but the winters are brutal and the wind you get up there is not envied. But I'm glad that you get to enjoy it in the summer, particularly at the highest levels of competition is always cool. So I'm just curious. I want to learn a little bit more about your journey and what really got you into wrestling and what inspired you to pursue it at such a young age.
Yeah, so I started wrestling when I was 8 years old, but I first saw the sport when I was around 5. My dad and his friend were wrestling in my living room, and I just, remember my mom yelling at them to not knock over the furniture and stuff. But I just remember watching them have so much fun. And so I told my dad, hey, like, I want to do that. But at 5, they both agreed, both of my parents agreed that I was a little too young to get into the sport. So they signed me up when I was 8 and said, Skylar, we signed you up for wrestling. And at that point, I didn't even really want to do it anymore. But they told me, you're going to do it for a year. And if you don't like it after a year, then you're allowed to quit. So I started wrestling at 8 and I've been doing it ever since. But my dad wrestled for Cornell. So he was a captain 3 years, I think, at Cornell. And then he went on to be an alternate for the Olympics in 76. So he's the reason that I got into the sport for sure.
So it's in your blood through and through.
Yeah, it's in my blood. Yep.
Well, talk to me a little bit about training at the Olympic Training Center. I don't think a lot of people really get the experience and understand what that means. And talk to me a little bit how that's kind of shaping your approach to the sport.
Yeah, training at the Olympic Training Center is an amazing opportunity, and I'm super lucky to be in the position that I'm in. I just have access to such great coaches, to such great partners, to such great medical staff. So you really do have everything that you could ever want in one place. And I don't think I've really had that in my career at any point, except for now. Just having everything, at my disposal has been great. So it's definitely been an awesome experience. And it's just been awesome to be able to be coached by Terry Steiner on a daily basis and get to work with, Jess Medina and Katie also. So it's just been a great experience for me at this point in my life. And I'm really glad that I decided to move to Colorado because I don't think that I could have these resources anywhere else. So I'm excited to finish out my wrestling career here.
Yeah, I mean, such a beautiful place to be and training at that top tier level. And looking into your background, one of the things I admire is how you're balancing all of your work in wrestling. I don't think people really understand how much effort, training, and just overall time wrestling at a high level takes. Never mind balancing demands of an academic career with that training schedule. Talk to me a little bit as you were going through that MBA program. I know you went to Brock and then graduated from Oregon State. Talk to me a little bit how you balance that training in your life in general.
Yeah, I think being a student athlete is incredibly difficult, but I think that having such a strong base from Blair really helped me for the rest of my life. So, for those of you that don't know, Blair is an extremely prestigious high school, and it's basically like going to college for high school. And I just remember my day starting at 7 a.m., going to class from 8 a.m. to 3:30, quickly putting on my wrestling stuff, running over to, the wrestling room, wrestling from 3:30 to 6 p.m., and then having homework from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., and then waking up and doing it all over. So I think that having that experience, I don't think I've had a crazier experience than high school, honestly. And, the time management that I had to form while I was there. So, yeah, in college, I felt that it was definitely difficult, but there's a little more flexibility in college. You don't have to be somewhere at all points of the day, and you don't have 6 classes a day or 7 classes a day. It's more of like three. So it's easier to kind of pace yourself, I think, as long as you're, on top of your studies. Some people like the structure of, having to be somewhere, but I'm pretty motivated, so it didn't really affect me, and I was able to stay on top of my studies and wrestling. But yeah, it's definitely a hard balance to have, but I think that I believe in habits, and I like to learn about the brain and everything, and I think that we as human beings don't understand completely how important habits are. And
Mm.
not saying that, people don't understand the importance of habits, but I don't think people understand the science of habits and, the neural pathways that you are creating. And I think that there needs to be more education on that, because everybody knows that habits are important, but do they know that they're actually wiring their brain a certain way, and it creates a certain structure that kind of makes them victim to their subconscious mind? I'm not sure.
No, I'm right there with you. I'm a very early riser. Rise and grind is the hashtag I use every morning, and I go to the gym. Usually, I'm there by 4 a.m. And if I go a day or two without that, my life just feels like chaotic. And it's just one of those things. It's like setting the tone. I did this thing, it was done, I cross it off. But when I missed crossing that off, it's like I start feeling weird and getting unbalanced. So I always like hearing people that are aligning that with their own lives. And it's, one of the things that I liked, I wrestled in high school. And one of the things I always appreciated about people that wrestle at the highest levels is just the amount of mental resilience and the motivation on top of maintaining that mental resilience is not easy. But I know you've dealt with that, obviously, through a semi-long career up to this point. Talk to me about how you balance that with those highs and lows that you experience while you're wrestling.
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I think that I've learned as I've, kind of come to towards the end of my career even more. I think that for a large part of my career, I was actually too motivated. And this sounds silly, but just kind of like too on top of everything, that it was just mentally very draining. And I definitely have had to find balance in the last couple of years to find that happy middle ground. But when you're going through it, you think you have that balance and you have that middle ground, and you can't really see another side because you're so conditioned to, operate a certain way. And so I think that you kind of have to go the other way a little bit. And I didn't go the other way in such a negative, I don't look at it as a negative. I look at it as I had to go the other way a little bit to find that middle ground. And I don't
Mm,
think that I could have found that middle ground without kind of going the other way. And so for me, I just, I was so strict on my diet. I was so strict on every little thing I put into my mouth. I was so strict on not going on vacation because it meant time away from the mat. I woke up every single morning on vacation, to work out. And instead of having the mindset of like, I get to do this, I want to do this, it was more of like, you have to do this. Like, you're not going to be the best if you don't do this. And I not that I slacked off with my workouts or anything, but for a time, I needed to be not so strict with my diet and I needed to live a little bit more. And that way it allowed me to find that middle ground. And now I have that balance of I still care about what I put into my body, but I'm not mentally having this battle of like, don't eat that if I have a cookie once in a while. And
mhm,
I
mhm.
don't have that mental battle of you missed your 3 mile run today, like now you're not going to win world team trials or whatever. I think that I have found this great balance now for me. And somebody else might look at my life and be like, that's not balanced at all, she's still crazy and she does way too much. But I have found that balance for me personally, and I think that that's kind of what life is about, is finding what works for you, because we're all just so unique and different.
I think anyone who's competed at a high level knows exactly what you're talking about. I think we can be really hard on ourselves, and there's something to be said about striving and pushing yourself, but also having that kind of negative reaction to your own actions. And so I align with that 100%. One of the things I really like to talk about on here, very kind of brand partnerships and sponsorships related as well. I don't think people really understand how hard it is for Olympic level wrestlers and how the systems they have to work within. I've had some judo athletes on here that I've had this conversation with. But can you just talk to me a little bit about your brand management as an athlete and what steps you've taken to kind of build your personal brand?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I mean, wrestling is not, a money sport. There's not lots of money in wrestling. And so that makes it a little more difficult, because companies are going to want to sponsor athletes in a sport that people really care about.
Hmm.
So that's kind of the issue that we face in wrestling. That being said, there are brands that do support wrestling. We have Rudis, we have Nike, we have Asics, we have Adidas. But there's still not much opportunity to make a lot of money with those brands. And we only really see, the number ones making a decent amount of money with their brands. And I think that NIL is changing that and changing that landscape a lot, which is unfortunate for those of us that are not in college anymore, but exciting for the next generation that is in college. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly difficult for athletes to get sponsored by these brands, but also these brands to sponsor the wrestlers, because there's not much of a return. So for me personally, building my brand, I tweet a lot. I think a lot of people know me from that. Actually went to NCAA's like 3 years, and I had people coming up to me and they're like, "You're the girl from Twitter." So don't know if I love that, but I definitely have a presence on Twitter, and I try to build up my Instagram as much as possible. I have just tried to put my authentic self out there and talk about a lot of the things that I struggle with in my personal life, and a lot of things that I think young female wrestlers struggle with, and men too, and boys or whatever. But I think that putting my personal experience out there, if I can just help like one person, to me, I'm doing my job, because I felt when I was growing up in the sport of wrestling, just with some of the, body image issues I had, and just like self doubt and, lack of confidence, I guess nobody was really being vulnerable on a social media platform. that I could really kind of confide in. And so I think that putting my story out there and putting my vulnerability out there should, or at least I think it will help, those young athletes. And I hope it does. And that's kind of what I have marketed my social media to encompass.
I noticed that, and that's really good to hear. There's a layer of authenticity that's missing from a lot of social media. So I've always found that the people who are authentic, or when I'm at my most authentic, is when people seem to gravitate towards the conversation I'm having. People are willing to respond. People are hitting you up afterwards. So I think you hit the nail on the head there, and it's really good to hear young up and coming athletes like yourself having that conversation. Talk to me a little bit about where you kind of see women's wrestling at today. It's funny because I graduated high school in 2003, so I'm out of it, but I've seen women's wrestling growing. And we had a woman who competed on my team. She was state ranked her freshman and sophomore year, stopped wrestling after her sophomore year. And it was always like the biggest letdown. There wasn't like a great environment for it for her, and I went to a smaller school. But I've been really enjoying seeing the way that wrestling has grown. How do you think that the wrestling community as a whole can better support athletes and maybe supporting women athletes in their growth of their sponsorships and their brand management?
Yeah, I think that women's wrestling has, had exponential growth in the last decade. I've seen it firsthand. I was one of 7 girls in New Jersey growing up wrestling, and now that number is over 3,000. And so it has definitely grown, immensely all over the country. We have 42 states sanctioned, or 44, somewhere up there. We're getting close, to having all of them. And I think the biggest thing, at least from my perspective, that I see in growing women's wrestling is we have to have structure at the highest, institutions, high school level, college level, in order for these girls to do the sport. And I think that we kind of have a backwards approach of, well, we need more numbers and we need more girls before we have that. And that's just the opposite of the truth, because if you build programs and you provide opportunities at the highest levels, these girls are now seeing that at 5 or 6 years old and seeing that they can go to college to wrestle and have all these opportunities. And that's what motivates them to stay in the sport. And I think that, as a wrestling community, we're kind of backwards on our thinking in that regard. And I love that these universities are having, women's wrestling and women's wrestling programs, but I do think that these universities do need to provide more structure if they do want a really powerful women's wrestling team. And I know that's easier said than done, but just from my personal experience, I would want to go to a college program that has structure, that has a coach that's being paid, that I have access to the weightlifting room. And I think that we really need to focus on, getting the athletic directors on board and raising the money to have these programs, and just kind of show them the niche market that they're tapping into. I think that they don't realize the growth of women's wrestling, and they don't realize that if they get on board ASAP, the benefits that it's going to reap in the end. And I think trying to rewire the way people think about that is going to be the hardest part. But I do my best.
It's a really important conversation, and I know you're on the cusp of NIL, and so probably missed out most of the benefits. But I have a feeling that as time progresses and as athletes are learning, oh, I can actually effectively market myself and not have the opportunity of potentially getting kicked out of my school or my wrestling program. That's something that I dealt with. So I'm really happy to see where it's evolving, that you can actually monetize your name, image, and likeness. And is, not necessarily take away from what you're doing in the sport, but as a way to support yourself and your growth as an athlete and as a person. One of the things I really like about what you're doing is you're actively engaged in mentoring young wrestlers. What advice would you give to the next generation of female wrestlers? Hey everyone, quick favor to ask. Did you know that nearly 80% of the people tuning in right now aren't subscribed yet? That subscribe button down below is what powers me every week to keep putting out these podcasts. Big shout out and thank you to everyone that's been supporting me for this. I couldn't do it without you. If you're enjoying the content, please subscribe below. It means the world to me. And for everyone supporting me, thank you so much. Now back to the show.
I think the best advice that I could give to the younger generation of female athletes is that, their journey is purposeful, and that, whether they see it or not, they're paving a path that has been sort of paved already, but they're kind of making it even better. And I hope that they see that and recognize that, like, despite the lack of opportunity, that they are changing the landscape of women's wrestling as well, and just encouraging them to keep trugging along. I mean, I think I had many times in my career where I just wanted to quit because it got hard, but I think that further in my career now, I've just kind of embraced the hard, and I've embraced the lack of opportunity, which sounds silly to say, but it's just kind of like I have to, because if I don't embrace this and keep moving forward, then it's never going to change for the next generation. And so I can sit here and I can pout about it that I don't have equal opportunity to my male counterparts, or I can just continue to do the best that I can and try to make the world a better place. And so that's more of the avenue that I take now. Don't get me wrong, I still occasionally want to have a pity party for myself, but
We all.
I will come around and be like, you know what, like, you're in this position for a reason, Skylar. You're exactly where you're supposed to be in life, and you just got to continue to get better, do better, and yeah.
Well, I love having these conversations, and always having conversations with younger athletes like yourself, and all the work you're putting in makes me feel really good, and makes me feel good about who's coming up in the next generation of top tier athletes. So Skylar, thank you so much for joining me today. Wishing you a safe and successful training camp as you prepare for all the competitions coming up this summer, and really looking forward to seeing your future success across the board.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was great to chat.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.